Good morning, good day to everyone who is joining us this morning in our podcast, the IMCM, Interfaith Multicultural Community Ministries How to Community Podcast. We have an amazing guest this morning. You all will be blessed in hearing from the Bishop, Andrea Vassell, is here today. Giving you some information about this amazing person. And good morning, Andrea. Giving you
Good
some
morning.
information. Reverend Dr. Andrea Vassell is a dedicated registered nurse. She's a pastor and faith activist focused on gender equity, LGBTQIA plus rights, and reproductive justice. She finds joy in being mother to Zachary and wife to Dr. Pei. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, you are.
Fabulous, fabulous. She is also the Bishop of Global Ministries in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, also known as TFAM. Dr. Vassell leads efforts to foster cultural change in faith and health. She has served as a faith advisor for reproductive justice to the Biden administration and currently co-chairs the governing board for Sacred. And we'll talk a little bit more about Sacred in our conversation. A womanist, she empowers women of color, particularly Black women, through initiatives like the Wawa Aba Womanist Leadership Institute and COGIS, which provides, did I say it correctly?
Hogis.
COGIS, thank you so much for that. And we'll talk about that as well, which provides menstrual hygiene products and education to girls facing period poverty. How amazing is that? Globally, she serves as the project director for MAP, which stands for MPOX Awareness and Prevention Program in East Africa, focusing on public health education related to MPOX, HIV, AIDS, and other STIs. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I can't say it enough. I am so excited about this conversation and just the brilliance with which you navigate your ministries and your focus. Now, as was mentioned in your bio, you have experience in nursing, pastoral care, faith activism. Could you just let our listeners know, how do you integrate these roles to foster justice in the communities that you serve?
Hi, Shannon. It's so good to be with you. Thank you for your generous offer, an invitation to be here with you. I love the work you do in the world, and I love how you move in the world. It was easy to say yes to you.
Thank
So thank you. Um, I just want to note that I am being joined by some of my siblings from East Africa and friends from here in the United States, and I thank you so, so very much. Um, what does it mean to integrate nursing, faith activism, and what was the third one?
And the third
Ministry,
one,
right?
yep, and your pastoral care and all of that. Yeah, how do you combine all of those and integrate
Interesting.
justice?
Interestingly enough, for me, they are not as separate as they sound. I have over 25 years of nursing experience. And in the field of nursing, people come to us for care. And we often see people at some of their most vulnerable places, right? We are integrated into their lives. They come to us seeking solace, to be cared for. And absolutely, nurses get in there and do that work. I have provided pastoral care while I was a nurse because I was a minister while I was nursing at bedside. And of course, pastoral care, again, people are entrusting so much of themselves, of their lives to us and asking us to journey with them. That is a privilege. And so those two, care of souls, care of body and spirit, and of course, faith activism. Faith activism is also taking care. It is meeting human beings in the places, particularly the most vulnerable among us, people who are most marginalized and minoritized, and caring enough to stand up for those, many of whom do not have a voice or whose voice are diminished in our society, and saying, excuse me, I will use my voice to care, to bring you into rooms where you may not always be, and to join my voice with yours so that we can be louder for justice and faith. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. In reading your longer bio, which is of course impressive, you'd made mention of your mother. And I'm wondering, you said that your mother instilled a deep love for service and justice in you. Can you share how her influence shaped your approach to activism, particularly in gender equity and reproductive justice?
Yeah. Big, big, big love and shout out to my mom, who was my very first mentor, my biggest cheerleader, and the person who told me I could do everything. So I love her. That Caribbean strength of motherhood she instilled in me. How she's done this. Beginning as early as I can remember, my mom has been the woman in the neighborhood who found the kids whose parents couldn't take care of them, who welcomed the woman who was probably experiencing um, intimate partner violence in her home, bringing in that woman who couldn't care for her kids, and her kids coming to live with us. Throughout my life, I can always remember my mom having a voice for those whose voices were diminished or the voiceless. Um, I remember one instance my mom would just bring people home. In one instance, she brought this man home who was having some mental health challenges. And so she would, feed him, provide meals, provide caring for him. And he would just come and hang out at our house. And as children, we were thinking, is mom, what is she doing? This guy is not all there. But she knew that he needed to be cared for,
Hmm.
and she would go and advocate for him in community. She would make sure he's wearing proper clothing, making sure that he had a bath and that's what we do. We bring people in. Yeah,
What a radically kind woman, your mother.
great way to describe.
Radically kind. And when I think of what our mission is as ministers, as we're churching in all of the different ways, that acceptance of someone as they are, how they show up,
Mm.
unconditionally accepting them. She took them in,
Hmm.
much to y'all's surprise, but she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was called to do. And that's profoundly amazing. We need more people like that. We need more
Absolutely.
people like that. She
Our
created
house
a
was
table.
the Yeah. Our house was the hub for every holiday. Everyone wanted to be where Auntie or Auntie Sissy was, and it made our home a happy place. Thank you for mentioning my mom.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, with that being said, so you've had this foundation of amazingness and awareness of the need to care for others.
Mhm.
You carry that into your role as bishop with Global Ministries for TFAM, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. For our listeners that are not aware of what TFAM is and what it stands for, could you give a brief description of that for them?
Absolutely. TFAM is the acronym for the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. We are a network, an affiliation of churches and organizations and faith leaders across the globe who have come together to share God's radically inclusive love.
Mm.
So, this was started by our beloved presiding prelate, the Reverend and Dr. Bishop Yvette Flunder in 2000. Isn't she incredible?
She is.
They just started this in the year 2000 after her ministry for HIV and AIDS in Oakland, in San Francisco, rather, um, was bringing people who had HIV and AIDS into communities where that wouldn't accept them. She
Mm,
had a long history of this, helping to provide uh, medication and advocacy. And these people came into her. At the time, she was co-pastoring another church, and these people just kept coming. And so she had to open her own church on Howard Avenue in San Francisco. And in that church, people found home.
mm.
LGBTQIA plus people who had been ostracized from their communities, and even those who were still in the communities that were preaching against them
Mm,
found a place where they could be radically included and not have faith that was oppressive or in any way at all diminuting for them. And
mm.
so the church was started, City of Refuge. And then out of the City of Refuge came TFAM. When Bishop realized that what she was doing, more people wanted it. People wanted it in other states, in other locations, to bring this loving community. And TFAM has, this is our next year will be our 25th year. We're having a big celebration in Atlanta. Let me just plug that. From June 30th to July 6th, we will be celebrating and
Right.
worshiping.
I'll be there.
Join us. Find us on Facebook and come join us. TFAM currently, as we are recorded, are affiliated with over 127 ministries across the United States. And of course, we include our affiliations in Singapore, our affiliations in South America, affiliations in Europe, in the United Kingdom, in London, and we have an affiliation in Cuba.
Mm.
And also, we are in East Africa, in Uganda, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and of course, Kenya. And it is my dream that wherever there are Black women, wherever there are people of color, wherever there are LGBTQIA plus persons who need to be included in a community that is radically inclusive and accepting,
Mm.
practice their faith, here we are. My dream is to find them and to bring them in community because no one should be separated from being able to worship their God because of their sexual orientation, gender expression, or gender identity.
Powerful, powerful. And TFAM continues to grow and grow and grow and grow.
Mhm.
Um, you are the perfect individual to be spearheading the global ministries for TFAM. And I wonder now, some of our viewers or listeners are members of smaller faith communities. They may have started a small faith community themselves, or maybe it's a smaller church environment, and they're trying to navigate the cultural differences within their worship space. And they're also trying to navigate how to reach out into community to become more diverse. We talked
Mhm.
about radical inclusion with City of Refuge and with TFAM and the work that you do. Um, what are some suggestions that you might have for our smaller faith communities in reaching out into community? What does that look like? What are some of the sacrifices that need to be made?
Oh, wow. What a great question, because it sounds really great intellectually, right? But as a lived experience, radical inclusivity is, in fact, quite difficult. In TFAM, we practice what we call the 12 steps of radical inclusivity. And the very first step is it has to be radical. Radical meaning it is not convenient. You don't get to show up in church and sit in the seat you've always sat in for the last 15 years. Right? You're going to have to move over. And at times, if this really works, not have a seat at all. Welcome the stranger. Um, Bishop Donaldson out of Seattle at Seattle University actually preached a sermon once that said, put another leaf in the table. That's what radical inclusivity means. It means building a bigger table. It means having people show up to your table that you don't know or even like.
Wow.
And people who are different from you, don't look like you, don't speak the languages you speak. And we have to make room for them. A great place to start is Bishop Yvette Flunder's book, Where the Edge Gathers.
Yes.
It is a tremendous book for teaching us how to build radically inclusive communities.
And it's not a long book. A lot
No.
of times we're thinking that it's going to require something as long as, it's not a long book. It's very concise and it's very clear what needs to
Mhm.
be. There are
Mhm.
sacrifices that need to be made because not everybody is on board with creating a table or even sitting at a table with someone they don't like or know about, right?
Right.
But we need to educate ourselves. So thank you for sharing that.
But here's the thing, Shannon. When
Yeah,
we make
yeah,
room for other people,
yeah.
we
Wow.
get bigger room, don't we? Because now they're making room for us. It is not one way at all. What happens when we meet that brilliant Latinx person who we wouldn't have ordinarily spoken to, but then we realize that we too can learn Spanish.
Yeah.
We can embrace, a good tamales is just something
Yeah.
else. Arroz con pollo, all of these things, when we include people into our communities, our lives,
Flautas. I'm never saying no to a flauta. I'll tell you that right now. Never
absolutely.
say no. I'm never saying no. You know, that reminds me of when I was in seminary, there was someone I was going to school with, one of my fellow classmates, worked with the prison ministry in San Francisco. Um, he was an ex-vato. So he had the neck tattoos and the this and the that. And I remember we'd be moving through campus and through Berkeley, and people would stare. No one would expect this person would be a minister, but he was so powerful with that
Mhm.
life that he lived, especially connecting with these individuals with the prison, the night ministry. Um, just, just amazing. So my goodness, people reach out,
Of
create the
course.
table and see who comes, right?
That's it.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And this is something that you did as we move on to speak about Wawa Aba,
Yeah.
seeing this need to create a space for training leadership for these women. Could you
Mhm.
tell us about Wawa Aba Institute, please?
So I am smiling because that's my heart. You've just hit on my heart. So let's talk about Wawa Aba first. Diane Bukarera out of Uganda is joining us on this Zoom today, and Florence Maina out of Kenya. They're both leaders in the Wawa Aba Institute. The Institute came about out of TFAM Global.
Mm,
Bishop Joseph Tolton, then Reverend Joseph Tolton, started TFAM Global when he realized that there was a need for ministries that were inclusive of those who are oppressed and marginalized in the LGBTQIA plus community in East Africa. Um, and so he started in Uganda as with SMUG, the Sexual Minorities Uganda, that group of people who come together and serve as an umbrella organization. Their leader had just been killed,
oh my.
and um, the community needed a faith connections because most of the vitriolic speeches, most of the oppression is coming from the conservative church in that country and acting as a catalyst for even greater harm,
Mm,
with using scripture as a battling ram, to harm people. And so Bishop Tolton went in there and was doing that work with the LGBTQIA plus community. And I remember being there and doing the work, and Diane Bacarera, who is on this line right now, who was a part of that ministry, said to me, Reverend, I need to talk to you. And I wrote about this in my doctoral dissertation. She was brave. She said to us, we are part of this ministry, but we also realize that even within this community that is marginalized and minoritized, there's even a greater marginalization happening. There are no women leadership. The women who have come out of patriarchal systems, LBQ women who were living their lives empowered and sitting in their identity, were still in churches that were predominantly led by men. And so she said to me, come, I need you to speak to someone else. And she brought me to another human called Biggie. And they sat me down and told me what they were thinking about. They needed to see more who looked like them. And at the time, I have to tell you, I said, well, I am working within a framework right now.
yeah.
What I can do. But they said, we trust you and we want you to help us to do something. And so I went back, I did all the work and working along with Bishop Tolton, working with TFAM Global, and Anne Craig, our beloved director of programs at the time. We wrote a grant and was offered the opportunity to start the Wawa Aba Institute. And that was in 2019. And we did a series of 3 conferences across Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya of LBQ, primarily LBQ and T women.
Mhm.
And it blew my mind because people showed up. They were hungry. They wanted the knowledge. They wanted the community with a faith understanding that affirmed them. It was started, of course, two of my amazing colleagues joined me and were teachers at the time. Three actually joined me, and it was the Reverend Alba Onofrio, who now serves as our Dean of Theological Education, Reverend Dr. Kelly Turner, who is now a pastor in her own right in Lancaster. Um, we were also joined by Reverend Janine Robinson, who is a champion for reproductive justice and a UU pastor now in Texas. And so we went and had a great time with the conference and from the conference pulled out 12 leaders who we did 13 weeks of online classes with.
Wow.
And from that 13 weeks, they were able to do projects in their community that utilized what they learned in class, their passion, using womanist principles, and addressing a need in their community. That year, we had 12 leaders that we pulled out. 12 more leaders. We got into COVID, and so we were slowed down a little bit. And we got another 12 leaders. And I thought, this is wonderful. But what is amazing is that these leaders in their countries did the work. They were so happy about what they've learned and being in Wawaba that they spread the word of Wawaba throughout their countries. And now, one of the biggest issues Wawaba has, which is wonderful, is not having enough room for new cohorts. We're having to kind of hold back the walls, so to speak. This cohort across the four countries, instead of just 12 leaders, we have 32 new leaders
My
that are
goodness.
graduating.
My goodness. In such a short amount
Amazing.
of time. It has not been a long time.
No.
If
And COVID was in the middle of all.
yeah, if that's not proof enough that the work that is being done was desperately needed, even after COVID, which may have slowed things down, but to have growth afterward, it's profound. And
Yeah.
you answered a question actually I was going to ask about what did those first steps look like? A lot of times when I contemplate um, a project of sorts, you need to get a whole room of people on board with what it is you're doing. But it seems as if the desire was already there for those that you were serving. Is that accurate?
It is absolutely accurate. It was a case of when the student is ready, the teacher will come. It
Wow.
was absolutely that case because even I was already working for gender justice. I was already in the field. I was actually a seminarian at the time. Nope, I graduated seminary and was introduced to womanism and womanist thought by the Reverend Dr. Stephanie Crumpton, who is now a professor at McCormick Theological Center, third wave womanists.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd been in connection with people like Reverend Dr. Valerie Bridgman,
Hmm.
our mom and womanist Bishop Yvette Flunder, Dr. Renita Weems, who was teaching us at TFAM, Dr. Pamela Lightsey, Dr. Kerry Day. All of these people were teaching us in TFAM. So when I formally became introduced in a scholarly environment about womanism, and it took off for me. And they came and said we wanted it. And it felt like kismet.
Hmm.
And I have to say, these humans gave me the opportunity to live into a calling that is my heart, to work for gender justice at the intersection of faith throughout the globe. I'm deeply grateful for them.
My goodness, what a blessing. All of the women that you name dropped are just profound human beings. They being in their presence makes me stutter a little bit because I just want to make sure I'm saying the right things.
I'm glad you're not the only one. Let me tell you, this past week, I had the pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Valerie Bridgman, whom I'd known for years, and I still stutter. I
Yeah,
was in the room with Reverend Dr. Gina Stewart. I still stutter. I feel like a teenager, like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
they are phenomenal. Yes.
They truly are. You referencing womanism, womanist thought. A lot of times I assume everyone knows the difference between womanist and feminist.
Mhm,
Going to seminary kind of opened that up for me. Could you
mhm.
just briefly give a description of or tell the difference between the two?
Yes, actually, uh, the term womanism or womanish, womanism, was first coined by our beloved Alice Walker. As Alice Walker was a Black feminist, and as she continued her education and continued working, she realized that there needed to be a movement
Hmm.
that went beyond feminism to address the particular issues and nuances of the lives of Black women and women of color. Feminism is amazing. It centers our lives and speaks to the fact of how patriarchy um, actually impacts our lives negatively in the world on all the fronts. However, feminism oftentimes do not address the economic disparities that people of color and Black women are facing. Oftentimes do not address things like the injustice in the incarceral system that our sons and husbands and nephews and some of our women are navigating. Immigration rights for women who are coming from countries abroad, from Africa, from the Caribbean, who are and from South America, who are facing immigration issues, can't find a job in this country, and are having to be domestic workers, even though they were doctors in their country, right? So the ways in which reproductive justice brings together all of the places where oppression is happening in our community, environmental oppression, where most of our communities or the Black and minority communities face have a greater impact for environmental injustice. Case in point, New Jersey, where I live, and most particularly Newark, New Jersey, and we know Newark is a Black community predominantly, is one of the most polluted environment in our country. Let's look at Flint, Michigan, where the water was so polluted and the children were drinking water with heavy metals, which we know is deposited in the brain. A lot of people in other communities do not encounter these things in the same way. And these are things that womanism look at. What's happening in the lives, the lived experience of women of color, particularly Black women, that are not being addressed by feminism. Alice Walker said we needed to go deeper. And she likened it to feminism is to lavender as womanism is to purple, right? Lavender to purple. One is a little lighter, one is a little deeper, and it's feminism and womanism. Not in opposition to each other. Womanism simply addresses the nuances and the issues of women of color and Black women in ways that are not addressed in the feminist movement.
My goodness, thank you. You've brilliantly defined the difference between the two. So I thank you for that. I'm sidebar. I didn't know you lived in New Jersey. I'm from Jersey,
Hey, where
South,
Jersey from?
South,
South Jersey.
very, very close to the shore.
Ah, I am also in Ocean County. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm in Atlantic County, the
Uh,
last exit, close to the last exit
very
on the Parkway.
good.
That's great. That's great. And the community in Newark is an excellent example
Mhm,
in speaking about the need to discuss disparity. And
mhm.
it's very clear why the womanist movement was needed for us. So thank you for that.
If I may say further, that
Yeah,
womanism
please.
or womanist thought is
Yeah,
actually dedicated to uncovering, right?
yeah.
Recognizing, understanding, and uncovering the false moral narrative that we have of the dominant, the false, let me say this another way, the
Mhm.
lies that are told by the dominant narrative,
Yeah.
okay? And to look at and uncover the nature of what they call the tripartite oppression, which is racism, economic disparities, crippling capitalism, of course, with the economic disparities, and of course, gender inequities. Those three things: crippling capitalism, gender inequality, and racism. We tend to try to hide those things in our country and not address them. But womanism is dedicated to not only understanding it, but uncovering it and sharing among us how do we cut the head off that serpent.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So, in working with Wawa Abba, do you feel that was a or is a cutting off the head of?
Well, according to the leaders who are now in Wawa Abba, um, it was something of that because economic injustice, right? The ways that economic injustice, or what womanism calls crippling capitalism, shows up in countries across the globe, particularly in East Africa or in Africa and in South America, is that most places of power, right? Seats of power are held by men. Those seats of power come with economic compensation, monetary compensation, power, access. And um, when we understand how that works, when we train women, LBQT, heterosexual, all of it, when we train women as leaders, they get to sit in those seats of those decision-making seats. They get to sit in those places of power and bring other women and into those places of power, which of course brings everyone up economically. My mother used to say, rising tide floats all boats. When we have people sitting at the table, when we have women sitting at the table, the decision making, the power brokering, then we understand that women's issues, the economic disparities, the environmental, all the ways in which women are minoritized, marginalized, will be addressed more effectively.
Hmm. That's fabulous. And as you're speaking, I have my list of questions, but of course, you're saying some things that are triggering some other questions that I have. One of which is with you working the global stage,
Mhm.
have you found more of a challenge globally working toward change or domestically? Can Wawa Aba, can that happen here in this country?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, Grounded in womanism, of course.
Mhm.
Wawa Aba can absolutely happen here. How Wawa Aba works is we use the four tenets of womanism, which is radical subjectivity, traditional communalism, redemptive self-love, and critical engagement as a guide for our actions,
Wow.
right? So radical subjectivity, we're oftentimes taught in school that we we have to be objective, right? There's no objectivity. Dominant thought is the one that actually is dominant. And when we bring our whole selves to the table, we're told that we're being subjective, too emotional, et cetera, et cetera. That is because it does not fit in with the dominant narrative that we're trying to uncover and dismantle. So radical subjectivity tells us bring all of yourself to the table.
Wow.
We could use that here.
Hmm.
Okay, traditional communalism. How do we behave in community? How are our actions guided by our historical understanding of community? You remember that
Mhm.
women taking care of each other's children in the community so that some woman could go to work when she's a single mom and not having to pay childcare, right?
Yeah.
Us taking care of each other, us showing up for each other. I remember being a kid and going to funerals that I hardly knew people, but somebody knew somebody,
Hmm.
and we showed up to support. Redemptive self-love. We could use redemptive self-love among many of us.
Hmm.
You know that they say you have to work three times as hard to get half the results.
That's it.
At redemptive self-love tells us that no, take care of yourself. Rest is resistance.
Hmm.
How do we take care of ourselves in ways that makes the dominant narrative about who we are untrue?
Hmm.
Serve vacations. In case anyone is listening, vacations are good things. Okay? Go away and rest because you can come back and fight harder the next time. And of course, critical engagement. How do we engage the things that are happening to us? We're in the middle of an election season, and many people I have heard speaking about one of the candidate as, oh, this is wonderful just because she is, we were talking about Vice President Harris, because she's a Black woman, she'll be the first Black woman. That is not critical engagement. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But if that is the only reason we're voting for her,
Yeah.
we need to step back and look again. Because this brilliant, wonderfully amazing woman who has served in so many parts of society comes to us with a myriad of experience,
Mhm.
comes to us with a long history of,
Mm.
of being able to, of making her ready for this office. So that's critical engagement. Look at it more critically, open it up, and not be afraid to do so. Could we use that here? I think Wawaba could definitely work here.
That would be great. So keep that in mind in case you plan to do that here. Let me know. Either way, I would like to be involved. I love that redemptive self-love, the
Mhm.
idea of that, and how healing that is to lineages. For
Mm,
many of us that are focusing now after COVID on healing our family trees, our lineages, how
mhm,
it starts with that self-love component, which
mhm.
has to be radical as well, because we may not have received that throughout our lives as our mothers did not, as our grandmothers did not, as our great great grandmothers did not. So thank you for mentioning that. So redemptive self-love. I know also with regard to Wawa Abba's mission, I'd seen the term conscious solidarity.
Mhm. Yes.
Could you tell me what that means to you?
Conscious solidarity suggests that um, we all have our interests. We all have the things that call to us. For example, gender justice
Mhm.
absolutely calls to me, and that comes out of my own background, right? But there's also LGBTQIA plus justice that I'm involved in, and
Mhm.
there's also environmental justice. What happens is sometimes people say, oh, I do this or I do that. How do you consciously walk alongside people in their movements? For example, let's take trans rights, right? A lot of people say, oh, I don't discriminate against trans people. But what does consciously walking alongside them look like? It means bringing their names and who they are into the room. It means not misgendering them. It means taking the effort, conscious effort to make sure that their movement, their lives are made better. So we make sure that when we put our names on the Zoom call, we put our pronouns because that normalizes using pronouns so that our siblings will not be misgendered in environments. People will get used to asking it. That's conscious solidarity. Intentionally walking alongside those who we're choosing to be in solidarity with.
And that's powerful as well. I see a lot of conversation about pronouns and those who seem to be fighting another individual's right to specify how they'd like to be referenced to. Um, and that I feel like this conversation is going to be going on forever in this society. Okay, so we've got Wawa Abba, amazing. We've got even more. You're working with Sacred, which stands for the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity.
Yes.
Focuses on advancing reproductive justice from a faith-based perspective, right? What are some of the challenges you've encountered in bringing faith leaders into conversations about reproductive rights? And that's here and from afar.
Reproductive justice, a movement that was started by 12 Black women um, uh, who decided that the conversation around abortion
Mm.
was not enough. The conversation around abortion spoke to having the right to not have children, and that's a wonderful thing. Safe abortions is something that every human should have access to if they need to, if they want it.
Yes.
Here's the other thing, though. In minoritized communities, we're not just dealing with the right to have an abortion, are we?
Right.
We're de- Reproductive justice says that we should have the right to have children or not have children, and to have safe environments, safe communities to bring those children up that we're choosing to have. Meaning that in our communities, we ought not to have polluted water and soil and air. It means that we ought not to be living in food deserts. It
Mm,
means that we should have enough money, the economic wherewithal to be able to purchase the things we need for our children.
mhm.
It means that we should have good schools in our communities. That's reproductive justice. It means that if our children in their lives are LGBTQIA plus, we should have communities to raise them without their lives being endangered. Reproductive justice says we should have safe communities and empowering communities to raise our children should we choose to have children. And so kudos to those 12 Black women. I don't have all of their names right here, right now in front of me, and I don't want to start calling names and not call all of them. But please look it up, reproductive justice. It is the movement that is indeed bringing all the aspects of our lives together around our sexuality, gender, and reproduction.
That is fabulous. When you were working with the Biden administration, involved in reproductive justice, can you flesh that out for us? What was that experience like?
So when as you know, Roe v. Wade, which was based on an individual's right to privacy, what you do in your home is your business, what you do with your doctor is your business, was a federal mandate. Everyone had access to how they would treat their bodies, how women and birthing persons would handle their bodies should they become pregnant. You can choose to have a child or not have a child. When Roe was overturned, or when we saw that Roe was going to be overturned during the Trump administration, an intentional, planned, orchestrated move by the conservative movement, um, when we saw that that was going to be happening, the Biden administration started bringing leaders from different segments of society together. And one of the things that they did was bring faith communities together that were pro woman and birthing people's right to choose. And one of the things they did was they included the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, which is a predominantly LGBTQIA plus affiliated ministry. And I was the person who, thank you, Bishop Flunder, who was chosen to go and to represent the voice of TFAM to the Biden administration and to bring, like I said, the voices of the LGBTQIA plus faith community into the room for those who could not be in that room.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Is there more information you'd like to share about Sacred? When did it begin? What we know what inspired beginning this
Right.
particular project? Yeah.
So Sacred was started as we are a network of faith leaders and organizations that come together to support reproductive justice, particularly in providing information, theological information and underpinning, giving, providing scholarship, right? Because we know that one of the most vociferous opposition to reproductive justice and abortions is the church.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'm just going to say that because there's so much more to be said there.
Hmm.
The church has been one of the most prominent oppressive forces for women,
Yeah.
and so what we do is the anti-abortion movement uses scripture
Hmm.
as and our faith communities as a way of speaking against the right to have an abortion, against abortion as a safe abortion as an act for those who need it. And so what we do in Sacred is we provide the theological scholarship to say that this is not true. We push back, particularly among the Christian conservative movement, to say that the scripture does not push back against abortion.
Hmm.
Jesus never mentioned abortion.
Mm,
And the religion of Jesus, Judaism, actually allows for women to have abortion in in many instances.
mm.
And to deny a woman the right to an abortion is actually anti-Semitic because it is taking away their right to practice in their religion. And so these are the kinds of information that Sacred provide. We actually have a curriculum that we teach, and we bring leaders in to learn these things and then to take it back to their faith communities. They teach their communities, and then they have a conversation.
Mm.
Would you like these principles to be a part of our faith community, a permanent part of our faith community? And once they say yes, once they have that vote, you've been UCC, you know what that vote is like. Once we have that congregational vote that they want to adopt these principles as a congregation, they can be designated a sacred congregation. And
Wow.
those congregations can be Christian or Jewish or Islamic or UU congregations. We're also tailoring our curriculum to be not just Christocentric, not just Christian, but we're working with the NJWC to make our curriculum specific to Jewish understandings and Jewish scriptures. We're also working to make our curriculum specific to Islamic understandings of abortion and faith. Yes.
That is, I cannot wait to look it up even further once we finish our conversation. If our listeners or individuals who are watching, if they're looking for something like this for their small interfaith community, they can just go to the website.
Yes.
Okay. Um, in case,
Sacreddignity.org.
okay.
Sacred Dignity, two D's, sacreddignity.org. It's in the chat.
Yes.
Go have a conversation with us. We have two amazing co-executive directors, Angela Williams and Letitia. I was about to say Letitia James. They are amazing humans who lead us
Mhm.
in ways that pushes back against the oppressive faith that speaks against abortion and reproductive justice. Get to
Power,
know.
powerful, powerful, powerful. So I'm wondering, well, first I want to specify for those that are here in the chat, I put a couple of links to some of the amazing organizations that Andrea is a part of. And I'll make sure to include these links as well when I'm posting to social media so that, oh my goodness, I would love for some of for all congregations to get these sacred classes. Please, we need it. As church and churching has changed, we need to move into this space of respecting the woman body. We have got to finally acknowledge the goddessness of who we are and demand that we are respected, that it is respected because it is ours. It's ours. Um, More amazing. I mean, I'm looking at the list. More amazing work with COGIS, KOGIS, an acronym for Keeping Our Girls in School. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Andrea?
Focus, Keeping Our Girls in School is a program that is currently in the Makuru Kwaru Ben slum in Nairobi, Kenya, where we provide menstrual hygiene products to girls monthly so that those girls who are experiencing period poverty never have to miss a day of school because they cannot afford menstrual hygiene products. Period poverty is a worldwide, a global problem, something that is hardly spoken about. And in the last few years, it has gotten more and more and more attention. There is actually an International Menstrual Hygiene Day. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, because we recognize that girls across the globe are losing up to about 20% of their education each year because they cannot afford menstrual hygiene products. How incredible is that?
Mm, mm.
Incredible. that girls are having to stay home
Mm,
because they can't afford pads or tampons. Can you imagine on that day when that particular subject is being covered, crucial to the rest of your year? If you miss some things, you're just going to stay behind.
mm,
And this is a part of the gender equity movement. Girls should not miss out on critical points in their education for something as simple as this. So I started um, this organization, COGIS, in Nairobi, with the help of Presbyter Caroline Omolo in Nairobi of the Cosmopolitan Affirming Church, and of course with Pastor David and Pastor um, oh my goodness, Eric, these amazing men who supported the movement. And we started, and it was supposed to be just a thing for a short time. And from 2018, here we are. We're still doing this work. Partners like the AFIA Center out of Dallas, Texas, partners like Iris House in New York City. My own family contributed. TFAM members have contributed to make sure that we keep these girls in school. Many of the girls have graduated. So far in our program, we've impacted the lives of over 800 girls to
wow.
help them stay in school. That, my dear, that's the kind of stuff that helps me to kind of get up in the morning, knowing that somebody somewhere their lives are being impacted by the work that we do. And I don't say I say the work that we do. Florence Nyayoke, Purple Diva, all of these leaders, Sarah Karaoke and Caroline Omolo in Nairobi, I call your name because this program would not have kept going without you. Your work to show up at that school on the days when I am not there. Absolutely not there. And to keep it going is things that, these are the kind of people that dreams are made of.
Mm.
Yeah.
The things we take for granted, for those
Mhm.
of us that have,
Yeah.
going to the closet, grabbing I like to use the word accoutrements, the accoutrements to whatever, but it makes me think of our unhoused populations as well. There have been
Mhm.
times when you see a woman in the street and you want to give money or you want to get them a meal, but what about the products,
What about the
our
product?
personal hygiene products? So that's huge. That's huge. Thank you for that. Thank you for
Um,
that.
Thank you. Some of my girls, I call them my girls. Let me not say that. It sounds so. But some of the girls over the years have discussed with me that they have had to use their bed linen, tearing up their blankets to make sure that they have the products or they can go to school.
Mm,
Girls have said, I stayed home and dug a hole in the ground and sat over it for hours.
good.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
Support us. Drop me an email, go to cogisproject.com and support us because every dime you give goes to the girls because what I should note is that these people who do the work of showing up every month and every quarter in Nairobi, they are volunteers.
What a blessing. My goodness. My goodness. I'm like, I'm going to really be pondering all of this after our conversation, but that right there,
Yeah.
when I went to the website and just kind of, as a woman, not even thinking of that being something to contribute
Yeah.
personal care products.
It's a non-issue for most of us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. There's so much. I've shared the link as well to Cocos in our chat. Um, I have just been so blessed by this conversation. Not just because I know you, but also because that, and I know that what you stand behind is radical. That's the only word that I can think of. Whether influenced by Bishop Flunder and TFAM and City Refuge, your mom, your mother, right? That
Mm-hmm.
inspiration. This is so radical. I'm excited to see where this all goes in the future. And it's done so well in such a considerably short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, for
Mm-hmm.
those that are out there in our smaller faith communities that maybe feel anything that they do would be just a mere drop in the bucket, look at the drop. Consider the drop. It's movement toward creating radical change, no matter which direction you go. So, looking forward to the future, what are your hopes for the next generation of faith leaders, specifically our marginalized and women of color, right? Um, what are your hopes for that generation, particularly in how they approach gender justice, LGBTQ plus inclusion, and reproductive rights? What would you like to see our next generation of faith leaders doing?
I would like them to consider Jesus.
Mm,
Consider Jesus. This brown-skinned Palestinian human who was bold, who said the things that nobody wanted to hear,
wow.
who erred on the side of compassion and love,
Mm,
who stood up and was a voice for the voiceless.
mm,
We tell the story that Jesus came to take away our sins and died for our sins. Jesus died for the sins of empire.
mm,
That takes that oppresses and takes away the rights of humans. Consider him. Be bold in your ministry. And where you can't be bold because it's not safe, support someone who's being bold.
mm,
Because one person said, well behaved women never changed history. It is the ones who will take that step, no matter how tiny.
mm.
Do something. Because if you do nothing, then everything remains the same. Each of us are called to do something. I remember, and I'm going to speak about one of our leaders. I was at Lancaster Theological Seminary, and one of our leaders was also a student there at the time, Reverend Naomi Washington Leapard. And I remember she was going to Ferguson, right? And I had papers to write, could not go to Ferguson. So what I did was I cooked. And I made sure she was fed. I made sure she had that meal before she left. I did whatever little bit I could do in that moment.
Mm.
To our leaders, particularly those who are serving minoritized and marginalized people, what little can you do? Believe me, that drop that Shannon spoke about is a drop toward
Mm.
creating a tsunami of justice across the globe.
Oh, I love that imagery. Thank you. As a poet, I appreciate. I might use it in a poem. No, I'm just kidding. I'll ask you first. Your work is it's vast. The change that you're creating, and I don't even know if you realize. I feel like I know people. I hope they're giving you your flowers now for the work
Mm,
that you and your sisters are doing and brothers and all of that. Um, I know the heaviness of ministry, the heaviness of caring for others. I know, as you mentioned, go on vacation. Aside from vacation and your beautiful family, your son, your husband, what does Andrea do for self care
mm.
apart and away from this amazing ministry?
A couple of things. Meditation,
Mm,
taking that time to go inward,
mm,
taking that time to connect to source, and finding that stillness inside of me. Um, Tapping into that wisdom, tapping into the strength that has brought me here. Those generations of human beings who did the work and who live in my DNA, you know, that meditation and prayer. I lean into the songs, what the people call the old songs of Zion. The things that brought us through, the
Yeah.
songs that I learned as a child that tells me that God is on my side.
Mm.
Those are some of the things. And I surround myself with people who like me, people who believe in what I'm doing, people who will pull up alongside me and say, come on, let's go, when I feel like I am falling down.
My goodness.
People who will say to me, girl, you need to sleep.
Mm.
Will call and say, hey, Bishop, how you doing?
Mm.
Those are some of the things. Staying connected to source, staying connected and grounded in who I am, surrounding myself with people who are journey partners, and being connected to something like TFAM, where
Mm.
people are doing the same work and sacred, doing what you love. That's what feeds me. Yeah.
Ah, that made me take a nice deep breath and remind me of the importance of all those things. We have some guests here today as well that are watching with us live. I want to open this space for, I know that you all know Andrea. Are there any questions that you may have or any comments that you'd like to make with regard to the work? You're free to be on camera or not be on camera. We can hear your voice as well. I just want to give that space for you now. Don't be shy. And you as
Mm.
well, Andrea, is there anything else that you'd like to add that's not necessarily in alignment with the questions? Is there something that you feel in your heart you need to share or would like to share?
First of all, shout out to Mama D from Uganda, Florence Maina from Kenya, Diane Bakurera from Uganda, and Dimsy from Kenya. These are Wawa Abba siblings who have joined in, and to my friend Angel, who's also joining in. Um, I would like to, I think I've said so much already that I'd like to just say that in leadership, find yourself partners who
Mm,
will work with you. Get yourself a mentor.
mm,
It is crucial. And also, not just a mentor, but get yourself someone who will, a sister, you know, who will pull up alongside you. Stay in therapy. Do
ooh,
not lead people and not be in therapy.
my goodness.
And care for yourself so
Mm,
you too can get refilled to go and take care of those who you're called to.
God
Yeah.
bless you. God bless you. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for speaking with us and taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm just absolutely honored to have had the chance to talk with you. I thank all who have joined us today as well. I hope in this process of, I'm going to be reaching out about sacred and kogis and wawa aba. All of those things are also things that are dear to my heart as well. So I hope to get to know you all very well. Thank you for today.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you.
Let me just say this before I get in trouble. I'd like
Yes.
to send a shout out to my beautiful wife, the Reverend Dr. Penny DeRosier.
Ah, yes, 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 yes.
We're
And I
watching.
apologize. I said husband initially, and
You did. Oh, I didn't hear that. Oh, I'm
people
married.
people do it with my partner as well. And I just, yeah, I appreciate you for correcting that. Thank you so much, Dr. Pay. Forgive me. You all
Thank
have an amazing day today. And if that is all, until next time, I appreciate you. I'll be making sure again that I put all of the links out there for everyone to be able to access. Keep your eye on social media. I'll be
you.
sure to put things into TFAM and also to Andrea and all of those things. God bless you all. Have an
God,
amazing day today.
peace and
Thank you
blessings.
for joining IMCM. And I'll be speaking with you after I press stop, Andrea. All righty. Goodbye.